Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Hultgren, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about how to conduct a good due diligence on your real estate transaction. This is not going to be asset class specific. This will be a pretty broad overview, so it will apply to several different asset classes: office, retail, industrial, multifamily, storage, and some single family aspects. Some will pertain to some asset classes, and others will not. So, but this is just a really good broad overview of the things that we should be looking at as real estate investors trying to do good due diligence. I am not an attorney, a CPA, or financial planner, so all this information is for educational purposes only. So enjoy. So I break due diligence down into kind of seven parts, right? We've got property overview, legal, title, survey, and insurance. We've got the physical property itself, tenancy and leases. Today we're only going to be talking about doing due diligence on leased assets. Operating revenue and expenses would be the next one, market data, and financial analysis. So those are going to be like the 7 parts of the due diligence process that we're going to kind of talk about today. Property overview. So property overview is going to be real high level information. As an example, you know, a broker might have brought this asset to you and they've got a memorandum produced on it, right? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the memorandum and get myself up to speed on it. If, you know, another investor brought me the deal, or you know, or if it's just owner direct, just get that first initial data and kind of digest that and figure out what we have, right? Then I'm going to do kind of a quick down and dirty financial analysis of it to see if there's something there or not, right? So not a real in-depth look, but just kind of a quick overview and see if this thing has some potential or not. The other thing that I'm going to request when I'm looking at this first step of project overview, we're going to request, you know, environmentals, right? So do they have a phase 1? For those of you that don't know what a phase 1 is, a phase 1 is an initial environmental assessment where they look at public data, community data, and try and identify on that site what have been the uses in as long as they have data on it. You know, was it a landfill at one point in time? Was it a machine shop where they changed oil? Was there a gas station 3 blocks away that had a major spill? All those kinds of things. So that's what a phase 1 is. They're going to look at all that kind of data and put together a nice report for you to digest and kind of either recommend further exploration or not. So I'm going to look at environmental, see if I can get that. We're always going to get a property condition assessment. I want an outside third party to look at the physical asset, determine what's the shape of it, you know, how are the, you know, HVAC systems, foundation systems, roof systems, all those kinds of things. What kind of shape are they in? They might have one. I'm going to request that, see if I can get what they already have. I'm also going to order my own. Surveys. Surveys, highly recommend surveys. I can personally say that one time we did not get a survey and we bought a piece of property and we missed the lot next door. Would have totally covered that if we would have had a survey. We got the whole thing squared away and worked out, but really recommend surveys. Review the surveys, look at them, have your legal team review surveys with the title. And those are some of the preliminary reports that I'm going to request. Those are also reports that, you know, we'll get ordered through us or our lending institution as we're going through the due diligence process on our own. Next part that I want to talk about is legal, title, survey, and insurance. So we're gonna look at evidence of ownership. Probably going to get title ordered and see, does the party that we have the contract with and who has signed the contract have the legal right to sell us that? I know a lot of investors that many times have put a piece of property under contract later to find out that either they didn't own it or they did not have the ability to sell that asset to us. So really important thing to do. Seems a little strange to new investors, but absolutely we want to check and make sure that does that party own that property? If it's in a corporation or an entity, is there a resolution that authorizes them to sign and contract that party to us? Evidence of casualty and liability policies. So on top of going out and getting quotes for our own casualty and liability policies, we also I love seeing if I can get a copy of their existing policies. I love to see if I can get loss runs from them to determine if there's been losses. Can really determine how our insurance and what kind of premiums we're going to pay moving forward. So I love to get those things. Sale and purchase agreements and exhibits, right? So do we have our purchase agreements, purchase and sale agreements signed? Do we have all the exhibits that we need? I strongly encourage good, competent legal attorney to help out with these things. Preliminary title reports, great title companies are critical to what we do, and reviewing those surveys. So those are what kind of encompass that section of due diligence. Physical, the physical asset itself, far too few investors request this, and I'm a huge stickler for it. Do we have plans of do we have plans of the asset we're buying, right? As-bills. A lot of times investors have them. They don't think to provide them as we're going through due diligence. They are great marketing tools, right? If we've got apartment complexes and we have layouts of all the units because we have those plans, make great marketing tools. Office spaces, we can use those tools to market. Or if we have to do renovations in the future, it's great to be able to provide those documents to architects, engineers, those kinds of folks for being able to modify the asset for us. So another one is parking, right? If we've got office space, retail, all that kind of thing, do we have adequate parking to meet the local parking needs and requirements that we have? A great thing to review. Huge, verify rentable and leasable square feet and reconcile it with the rent roll. Real important in office, retail, industrial spaces. We want to verify what we have for total square footage. Most of our leases are based on square footage, so we need to look at that data, check the leases out, make sure that that we can verify that the building is actually the size we have. A lot of our single family folks are analyzing the rents and breaking it down in rent per square foot. So are we sure that we have the square footages that we think we have? Next thing, deferred maintenance. What is going to need to be fixed, right? Where are the leaky toilets? Where are the roofs that need to be redone? All those kinds of things. Parking lots in disarray. These assets a lot of times have deferred maintenance. Let's identify what those things are and get costs for them. Capital expenditures. I always like to get a list of capital expenditures that the previous owner has done. A lot of times it's great information. It's helpful information when you turn it over to property management, so they know that they have a new chiller on the building. Another time I got a list of capital expenditures and found out a new rubber membrane roof was 2 years old. Hey, is that roof warranty transferable? Yes. Great. Now I've got a new warranty when I take down the asset. Always love to get a list of capital expenditures that the previous owner has done. Outside elements. This one is huge and all too often overlooked. So as an example, if I'm going to buy an apartment complex that has vacancy issues, and part of my objective is to fill this complex, I take it down, I buy it, I find out a month later that they're shutting the road down out in front, and it's going to be a huge pain for tenants to access my property. That could be a big deal in me being able to accomplish my business plan. So all too often, outside elements like road construction, large utility projects in the area that might affect our ability to lease the space. Retail, if your tenants, customers can't get to them, that might be an issue moving forward. So all too often overlooked when we're looking at physical due diligence is any outside elements such as road construction, anything like that. Tenancy and leases, complete and accurate copies of all your leases. Can't stress this enough. Get copies of those leases, review them, and make sure that you know what you've got. Certified rent roll. Make sure that the previous landlord is giving you a rent roll and they're certifying that that is correct and accurate. Very, very important. Review all the leases. A lot of times in commercial assets, we'll get an opinion drafted from legal, so that some of these leases are fairly complex, and we just want to make sure that we truly know and understand all the different points in the leases that we're getting. Determine if there's any outstanding rent abatements, prepaid rents, leasing concessions, tenant improvement allowances, anything like that. So one of the ways we're able to really do this is through estoppels, right? We can get a estoppel from the existing tenant. What this is the tenant is certifying that the lease that they have is true and accurate, and there's no outside addendums or any sort of verbal spoken deal that hey, your rent was $1,000, but we're gonna pay, you're only gonna have to pay 500 bucks, right? So we can do things to ensure that we do know what our revenue will be in the asset based on the existing leases. Do we know if there is if there's a tenant improvement clause or any tenant concessions? You know, sometimes leases might have, you know, last month free. Who's paying for that last month? Can we do we know what that is, and how are we going to deal with that, right? So understanding a lot of those things is critically important. Comparing the leases to the rent roll, right? They provided the rent roll. We have all the leases. It's a double check. We want to make sure and do a good lease audit. Go through all the leases, go through the rent roll, and ensure that the leases match the rent roll. Big one here, financial statements of tenants and guarantors. If we bought a, you know, office building or a retail center, right? Bought a retail center, my #1 tenant's JCPenney's, might be an issue since they're about ready to file bankruptcy, or maybe have already. We definitely want to review the financials of tenants, especially in commercial spaces, especially if we've got you know, single tenant assets that we rely on that tenant to foot the bill. Definitely want to take a look at tenant financials whenever you can get them, and understand who's standing behind the leases. If it's an apartment complex, you're probably not going to do that, but it's also good to know who are my tenants in the building. Where are they working? What, you know, are all the tenants working in the oil field? With oil prices being extremely down, that could be a bad thing, right? So above and beyond just reviewing financial statements of the tenants and guarantors, truly understanding who and what we have there and how it's going to be paid. Operating revenue and expenses, the good stuff, right? We want to review last 3 years operating statements. We want to review year-to-dates. We want to review operating budgets. We want to get property management involved and figure out how much they're going to charge us to manage the asset. We want to double check these things with property management. We want to cross-reference and make sure that they can manage this asset as well or better than the existing owner. What kind of other data can they provide and help us to set up these budgets? We want to review property tax statements, insurance bills, utility bills. Do we have to foot the bill on in utilities? Do we have a plan for saving energy? You know, is there tax credits for saving energy? Some of the things that you can look at is going from an incandescent bulb to an LED bulb. What's the payback time frame on that? Looking at some of those things when we're reviewing expenses. Looking at capital expenditures. How much are these capital expenditures going to cost us? Do we have an adequate budget to pay for the capital expenditures that we're going to need? And another big one is verifying miscellaneous income. You know, we look at financial statements. They might have laundry income. Sometimes that's a lot of quarters. How do we verify that that's correct? Are they depositing all of that? You know, a lot of times you'll hear, you know, small apartment owners say, you know, the laundry income goes in my pocket, but I get $600 a month, or whatever the case may be, right? We can't verify that data. If we can't verify it, it doesn't mean anything to us, and it's not data we're going to look at. Market, right? So we're gonna look at the current market. That's where we're gonna look at our appraisal. Does appraisal support the value? We're gonna inspect the property. We're gonna tour the submarket and competing properties. We want to go put boots on the ground on these other assets, review them, and make sure that they are what we believe they are. We want to look at total inventory, total vacancy, yearly absorption rate, right? If we have 100 units in a 500 unit apartment complex to fill, what's the absorption rate? How long is it going to take us to fill that? And do we have that factored into our model? Average rental rates in that market, submarket, typical reimbursement structure, right? That's specific in commercial, right? What's the reimbursement structure? Are there triple net leases in the area? Are we comparing it with double net leases, triple net leases, gross leases? All those types of things we're going to want to take a look at. Typical tenant improvements. You know, in commercial space, what's a typical tenant improvement allowance? Is it $5? Is it 10? Is it 20? Is it $30? Every market's a little bit different, so we really need to look at that and understand it. Typical leasing commissions. Every market you'll see agents get paid differently on leasing commissions, whether that be residential, office, retail, commercial, industrial, always a little different. Lease terms. Some markets, you know, a 12-month lease might be typical in residential. Some might be 2, some might be 6 months. We really want to understand all that. And same in commercial. 5-year leases might be standard, 10, different things like that. Sales comparables. What are comparable properties selling for? Lease comparables. What are comparable properties leasing for? Preferred demographic analysis, right? What are the demographics in the area? Do they sustain and support what your business plan is? Traffic counts in retail. Do we have enough vehicles driving by every day to meet the needs of your tenants or future tenants? And vacant land. Is there a barrier to entry for more competition to your particular asset? Financial analysis, pro forma, right? We want to build a pro forma, and from all the data that we're pulling, we're constantly changing and evolving our pro forma. I typically, when I build a pro forma, you know, I might have 50 models done by the time I'm ready to close on that, because I'm at every step of the way, I'm constantly tweaking and modifying the data as I remove assumptions and create more solidified data. So absolutely do financial analysis, use all the data that you have to continue to refine and perfect your data. I've went through these really, really fast, and they are not always done in that order or any particular order, right? They are often done scattered throughout, coming in at different times, but that's a really good overview and generalization of all the things you're going to need to look at generally to do some due diligence. Hey, thanks for hanging out and checking out my video. Like it, share it, comment. I appreciate you, and look forward to any questions that you have. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.